Hi, everybody. I'm talk show host Jacquie Blaze. For those of you who don't know me, I interview the world's top 4 love experts who together uncover a core skill set to love, here to help me delve deeper into love and especially happiness and fulfillment, with which out we would have nothing, is happiness expert and dear friend and talk show host Rob Mack. He's been on the Today Show, Good Morning America. He's been endorsed by Oprah. He has an amazing book and very helpful tips. Rob, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, my pleasure. And our audience is in for a treat today, that's for sure. Let's start by talking about your personal journey, because it wasn't until a couple of months ago when GQ profiled you that I picked up the article and I went, oh my God, I've known Rob for a couple of years now and I had no idea about your personal struggles. I know that you'd, faced depression. Well, I'll let you tell the story.
Oh, yeah, you nailed it. I mean, I was suicidal. I mean, that's how I do the work I do today. I was suicidal. I was deeply depressed, not for a whole lot of good reasons. I had a great family, a little bit of conflict there, but like any family. And I did well athletically, did well academically. But I remember being unhappy as long as I remember being alive, quite honestly. And I thought that over time, I would grow out of it. You just think, oh, well, when I finally become that professional athlete, or I finally, get the girl, or I finally make some money, I'll grow out of this unhappiness thing. But actually just the opposite happened. I became more and more depressed, so depressed that eventually I started doing research on ways to kill myself. And I got to a place where I knew I didn't have access to a lot of means and methods to make that happen. So I basically decided I would just go into the kitchen. I got a steak knife and I just dug it into my wrist. And you might not be able to see it there on the screen, but I still have the suicide test marks on my wrist. Something very strange happened though at that moment, Jacquie. Like I was really testing to see how painful it would be to slit my wrist. And as I went about doing that, I felt this indescribable peace and inexplicable kind of bliss and happiness wash over me, even love, for no good reason. Like my life had not changed on the outside, but on the inside I felt differently. So at that moment, I decided to postpone the suicide, and I only postponed it for like an hour. I was not really committed. I just thought, well, I can put this off for an hour, but I should look into what happened here. Like, why am I feeling better despite nothing on the outside having changed? So I did lots of research. That hour bled into a few days, then a few weeks, and then now it's been a few decades. But the whole time it was like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. But I just kept reading, listening to, and consuming everything I could about happiness, and just applied everything I could. And I started tracking what worked and just forgot about what didn't.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being so open, because, let's talk about this crazy situation. We talked about doing this interview and I was hoping to do it with you in studio, and now we're on Zoom and, dealing with this nonsense that's surrounding us called COVID. People are at home. They're feeling depressed. I mean, I've even felt a little bit of that whole like isolation and feelings. And even though I'm equipped with all the tools and know how to handle all of this stuff, it's been challenging at times. How do we help people?
Yeah, such a great question, Jacquie. I think that by first and foremost, we want to be the change that we want to see in them, right? It's a cliche, but cliches become cliches for a reason. So if you really want to help people be happier, more peaceful, more relaxed, you want them to feel more loved, you want to be that love, you want to be that happiness, you want to be that peace. And so that means first and foremost, doing what you can to self-soothe, to emotionally regulate, to be cognitively agile, so that you're reaching for and diving into increasing peace, happiness, and love yourself. Lots of us overlook that and we think, oh, that's not doing very much. How's that going to help the person down the street or the person around the corner? But believe it or not, as contagious as COVID is, this emotional experience that we're all having is way more contagious. Emotion by far is exponentially more contagious than any virus has ever been, because you can literally infect people through the phone, through email, through text messages, through video, through, and so it's important to remember that. So the number one thing we can do is we can be peace ourselves and help other people experience the peace just through knowing us, right? Just through connecting with us. So that's the number one thing. I think you probably have a lot of experience doing that, I think, Jacquie.
Well, and I'm feeling the infection just speaking to you. You're just a ray of sunshine. You are so positive and I absolutely adore you. What are some things that people at home can do? Obviously, there's exercise, there's, picking up the phone and talking to a positive friend. Certainly not necessarily avoiding someone that's down, because that would be like, being a bad friend. But what are some tools and strategies that we can employ in this time of crisis?
Yeah, great question. I just want to reflect back something. I absolutely adore and appreciate you, Jacquie, and I mean that. I love who you are. I love the way you show up. I mean, you are this shining, living example of divine light and love, and you just always are spreading that. So thank you for that, and I mean that. So response to the question, great question. I'd say that the first thing is this: lots of folks, and for good reason, they've let their schedules slip a little bit, and now is a great time to schedule your life, in ways that makes you increasingly happy first and foremost, but also productive and helps you to feel good about yourself. So it's okay. It's great. We want to sleep in. If you can sleep in, you want to go to bed late, that's fine. But you want to create some structure to your life. And as part of that structure, what you want to be doing is you want to be optimizing for the kinds of emotional experiences that you want your life ultimately to be about. So for me, my day is, yes, about getting work done and about getting chores done, but really it's about how can I optimize my life so that I feel the kind of meaning and the peace and the happiness that I'm ultimately after, right? So for me, that means identifying what we call happiness islands. Happiness islands are those things that with very little time, energy, or effort, make you feel alive and inspired and just happy, right? And you want to identify those things and then see what you can do to schedule those things into your day. So for me, that means exercise for sure. We know that 30 minutes of a moderate exercise is the equivalent to taking an antidepressant and anti-anxiety pill. It has that much of a powerful positive effect on our psychological and emotional well-being. We also know that a mindfulness practice is just gold. Like, not thinking is one of the best things you could possibly practice doing. Is just learning not to think. You can learn to do things, Swiffer, vacuum, laundry, data entry, listen to people without thinking. You can be and rest in that silent, still, serene presence inside, that feeling of peaceful aliveness in your body, like that feeling of energy and life force in your body. You can feel into that more as you go about doing what you do, and you'll be surprised that activities that normally seem like they're nuisances or they're very annoying, like the dishes, suddenly have an aliveness that they didn't previously, right? So I'd say that those are my top 3 tips. The fourth one for sure is staying off the news. There's very little to be happy about there, or there's no happiness in the news. Staying out of the future, okay? And I know that's hard for people. If you can plan for the future in a healthy, productive, efficient, effective way, do so. But most people just spiral when they start thinking about the future. And so stay out of the future if you can. Be increasingly present moment minded, which just means doing more things for themselves, for joy's sake alone. And you'll find that you actually do those things better and you have a lot more fun doing them. But those would be my top sort of 4 or 5 tips. The other thing, like you mentioned something powerful too, which is just reaching out to folks that are professionals or folks like yourself or like myself that, have practiced holding space for people who might be having a hard time right now.
Yeah, no, my work is really saving me, and I've started running, and I'm not normally a runner. And when you run, and I think this is a really great analogy to what you've just been saying, is when you run, like I've started running, but I'm running I started with 100 meters, Rob, and then I built it up to 1 kilometer, and then I do a little bit of a walk, and that's how you build kilometers. But I was looking at all these people that are doing 20 kilometers, and I went, I'm never going to get to that. And I think happiness is a little bit like that, isn't it? It's about building on that.
So good.
Bring out the best of us, the joy in us, and then things get easier and better. So there's always hope. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. I think it's really important to, kind of emphasize that message that you're sending to people, because you're just such a bright light, and people really, really need this message right now more than ever. I've been saying that, love is key to all life situations, but happiness is love. And without happiness, you don't have fulfillment in love. Let's talk about that, because a lot of people look for the other person to fulfill them. And right now there's couples at home, or people are single and they're wishing they had someone who could make them happier. What's that all about? How do we help them?
Wow. I love this, man. There's so much there that you said that was so good. Like, I got shivers again. I have something called a shiver test, or a soul test. When I get these soul shivers, it just knows that I'm connected, right? And so the first thing I want to do is just echo what you said, which was just so wise, which is that happiness and love, really, it's more about consistency than it is intensity, just like working out. And I used to be a runner, and the first time I ever ran a mile, okay, and I was used to playing basketball, it was the most torturous thing in my life, and I always thought I would never be able to become a runner. And lo and behold, just every day I did just what I could. And before long, I became one of the best cross-country runners in the state at the time. I was in high school, and I remember thinking, how odd is this, that I could be so bad and get so good so quickly? But so much of it was because I just did what you said, which was just put one foot in front of the other. Don't try to see the whole staircase. You don't need to see the whole staircase. Just take the one present step here and now, right? So to that end, what else you said, which was just pure platinum, was that you're right, happiness is love. And I think of love being your happiness shared. So when you feel happy, truly, deeply tapped in, tuned in, turned on, for no good reason other than you're just dialed into who and what you truly are, we call it happiness. When you share that treasure with the world, we call it love. So happiness kind of gives you the treasure, or is the treasure. Sharing it, we call love, right? And so I agree with you totally. The challenge right now is that, and the opportunity is that lots of folks, before all this pandemic, we had an epidemic of stress and loneliness, and of folks feeling loveless, without love. Okay. And this pandemic in lots of ways has really enhanced that, or emphasized that, or deepened that pain that people feel, but it's also increased the opportunity for us to sort of resolve all that. And so we often think that being alone means that we feel lonely, but the truth is that being alone and being lonely are two different things. You can be and feel lonely in a crowd, right? You can not feel lonely alone. And so part of the challenge and the opportunity at hand is to realize that if you're really wanting a relationship, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether you want to network better in your professional life, the master key scientifically and statistically is to get happy first without having that relationship, without having the romantic or the professional platonic network necessarily, but find a way to get happy within yourself without the partner. And you quickly discover that you'll find a partner, particularly a happy one, so much faster, and the relationship will be so much happier and healthier for it. We know that statistically, happier people get married earlier, they stay married longer, despite whether or not they're in a relationship or whether they're married or not, right? So happiness really is the best thing for your relationships.
I 100% agree. And you've said that so well, because if people aren't happy and they get into that relationship inevitably always turns into a toxic relationship. And then people are either faced with domestic violence, or they're having to face a breakup, which is so painful to start with. And I think people right now who are at home and they're alone, I think that they're alone because in a way they're whole in themselves. They've chosen not to be in that relationship. I think it's all a choice, just like happiness is a choice. I think those people have chosen in the past to be alone, whether they've been hiding behind those social circles or behind a busy career, or for whatever reason, they don't like to be triggered in a relationship, or they don't know how to do the work. I think that right now they have a golden opportunity to sit at home and start to do the work. Obviously, we recommend that they go and read your book, that they watch Love Unraveled, and really get the skill set to know how to make themselves happy. But let's start with it being a choice. Is it as simple as I choose to be happy? Because I know as a woman, at least once a month, I get into this funk where I'm like, oh, I'm feeling really anxious, or I'm feeling a little bit depressed. And I know my partner gets really annoyed with me because he's like, don't get negative. How do we deal with this?
It's a great question. So I'll put it this way. For most of folks, it doesn't feel like a choice, even though most of us would agree, oh yeah, it's a choice. You can choose to be happy. I'd say for most of it, doesn't feel like a choice because the brain doesn't like change. And if we've been programmed or conditioned to practice unhappy thoughts most of our lives, we've gotten really good at practicing those unhappy thoughts, and it's become automatic. And so your brain is literally wired in a way to support an unhappy experience, to support unhappiness. And if you can see through that and realize and recognize that you always do have a choice in terms of thinking about things that hurt or not, thinking unhappy thoughts or not, that you don't have to always put your hand on the hot stove. Looks very appealing and very attractive, but you don't have to put your hand on it. You know it's hot. And instead of touching those hot thoughts, you can distract yourself. You can pivot and put together a better feeling story that's still based in truth. You can just entertain yourself in some other way, but just not entertain those and feed and fuel those unhappy negative thoughts. If you can do that for 66 days consistently, you don't have to do it every single time. You're not going to do it every single time, but you'll find yourself ramping up more and more. And after about 66 days, at least so says neuroscience, you will actually begin to rewire your brain for a much more effortless and easy and automatic and organic and natural experience of increasing peace, love, and happiness. Okay. So in the beginning, it feels like hard work, but everything feels a little hard in the beginning. Walking is hard. in the very, very, very beginning. That's why you crawl, but then it becomes easy. Everything is hard until it becomes easy. So you put the effort in at first, but that effort turns into effortlessness over time. And one of the keys I would say for most people, particularly when it comes to happiness and enjoying your life, is that you don't want to make this so much about bliss, sort of about discipline, but more about blissipline, right? Blissipline means, how can I make this fun? How can I almost make a game out of it, so that when I have a negative thought or negative experience, can I just have a little more fun and try to enjoy thinking a happier thought or focusing on something happier just for the fun of it, not to get the result, because that's a trap, but just because it would feel better right now to be, happier. So that's step one. There's kind of two levels. The first level is positive thinking, essentially, or positive feeling. There's a deeper level, and some people prefer this other level more so, which is not trying to think positively. So when you have the negative thought, you don't need to pivot. You don't even need to be that cognitively agile. But what you do is you're able to step back and remember and realize and recognize that you're not the thinking, you're the awareness behind the thinking. There's something that's able to see the thinking, which means you're not it. You're this awareness, this thoughtless awareness that exists behind the thoughts. And if you can identify more with that thoughtless, wordless awareness, that is happiness itself. It's the deepest kind of happiness. At first, again, it doesn't feel like happiness, but as you practice, you get better.
I love that. So as you got out of this state of wanting to take your own life, how did you enter this journey? What was the turning point for you?
Yeah, so I basically made a decision that I was either going to kill myself or I was going to live blissfully. There was no in between. Like, I meant that, And so it was a life or death thing. And when something is life or death, that you get really good or you quit. So it was life or death for me. Literally every day I thought, I'm literally fighting to live or not, and to live blissfully or not. So I just kept going and going. At some point in time, I discovered Abraham Hicks. Love Abraham Hicks.
Love him.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Led me to Eckhart Tolle and Ernest Holmes and then I found this Master's of Applied Positive Psychology at UPenn, and I took that program. But I was already really quite stable and secure and standing firm in my happiness at that point. But it was mostly, it crept up on me little by little. And one day I just realized I hadn't thought about killing myself for like a day or two. And that was a huge accomplishment. But it wasn't really a moment when I was like, whoa, things have really turned around. It was so gradual. It's like losing weight. One day you just look in the mirror and you're like, oh, wow, I guess I did lose a little bit of weight. But you kind of have to see the before and the after picture to really know. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. I love how the universe just kind of brought everything to you. And I think it does start with a choice. And sometimes our brains kind of go into this automatic, oh my gosh, how is it going to happen? Which is creating a whole bunch of anxiety. And I love what you said that, we do kind of hit rock bottom before we make that turning point. And that's something that I'm uncovering with quite a few of my guests that are coming on. We had a housewife of Orange County on last week, and she was dealing with anxiety and depression, and she basically hit rock bottom, but she promised herself, just like you, that when she recovers, she's going to celebrate life. And she's just a ray of sunshine, just like you are, Rob. Thank you so much for sharing more of your story. I want to know more about it. So after you discovered Abraham Hicks, how did you then develop all of this? And has all the challenge that wanting to take your life, has that completely disappeared?
Oh yeah. I mean, complete, like I would say, and this isn't, the one thing I've learned along the way is that it's going to sound kind of funny to folks, but I think they'll get it, which is when you're not, happiness is. When you are, happiness isn't. Meaning that when I'm in my head and I think that I'm the one making myself happy, that I'm doing all these things, that's when you make your life really hard and you're not really happy. You kind of compromise or dilute your happiness. It's kind of like sleeping. You try too hard, you can cause it to backfire in a way. And so I will say that I'm genuinely, I've never met anyone happier than me. And that's because I can't do most anything else in the world. I mean, I could barely tie my shoelaces probably. I can't cook, I can't do anything, but this one thing I've spent decades just really wanting to get good at for purely selfish reasons, really, So I initially turned the corner, really, I guess, as I started throwing myself into everything I could read, everything I could listen to on positivity, on happiness, on peace, on love. And then what happened was I started tracking the stuff that worked, and then I would keep it in this journal. And I would just keep doing it over and over and over and over, like kind of a crazy person. And before long, that journal became Happiness from the Inside Out, which is the first book I wrote. And honestly, it was around that point, probably a year or two before I wrote the book, when I really felt that shift. And it was mostly because I realized that whether I called it a career or not, I needed to make happiness my number one career. That more important than my professional life or career, I needed happiness to be the thing that I was making my life about. Like I couldn't put anything else or anybody else before that happiness thing, or it's going to be of no value to them. So that was what I did that made the most sense. And then I just started doing whatever I could to get my life, the logistical parts of it, in alignment with that. So I said, well, this is a job I don't particularly love. I'm not going to do that kind of work anymore. You know, this is a friend that I love very much. I can probably love better from a distance. So I'm going to let that person experience their life from a distance, and I'll send them nothing but love. But I started making these decisions that felt a little hard in the beginning, but because I was so committed to happiness, they were really easy in the end.
I can completely relate, because that's exactly what happened to me with love. I mean, in a way, I didn't choose it, but I needed it more than anybody, perhaps, because, you know, I was dating lots of people, Rob. I was dating amazing men. I was living in Los Angeles, living the high life. I had an amazing career, wonderful dates, but I wasn't feeling fulfilled. So, and I wasn't realizing that fulfillment was a choice that I had to make. I felt like I was missing out on something, and I kept falling into that comparison trap. Let's talk about this. What was that all about? Why
Especially you, who could be compared to you? I mean, you're such a light, you're so beautiful, you're so, I mean, really accomplished and successful and so eloquent, and yet we all do it, right? Even folks that look and are as accomplished and as beautiful and as brilliant as you, we all do it, right? So it's true. You know, I think part of the challenge is that society is set up in a way that kind of encourages that almost. I mean, even when you're a kid and you're on the playground or you're in the classroom, it's all about the grades that you got and, you know, how you could do so much better. And sometimes our families unintentionally, they don't always have bad will or bad intentions around it. They encourage us to be competitive and to compare. And there is this healthy sense of competition sometimes in life, but it's interesting. Technology and social media has just held up a magnifying glass to that comparison and comparative sort of trap that we all have experienced in our lives. That's part of the reason I think it's so important. Comparison and competition are a real problem if your litmus test for life or your litmus test for self-worth is success in the world. And that's why a huge part of this happiness thing is, look, you've got to redefine success and redefine self-worth and self-value in terms of happiness, or something that's way less conditional than success, that's way less externally driven and other referent than success. It's got to be something that's internally driven and self-referent. And so, but until you do that, you're always going to fall into these comparison and competitive sort of traps. But it's the one thing that will always compromise your happiness, because you're not meant to be like anyone else in the world. I mean, that's what makes you you. That's why every snowflake is different, because they all have something uniquely divine to offer in terms of gifts and talents and services. So until you sort of discover who and what you truly are and make happiness your litmus test and measuring stick for life and for self-worth, it's very difficult to sort of get your hands and your arms around this comparison thing.
And you're spot on, because that's exactly what I was doing. I was measuring my success based on my career. And then when my career took a dip because I had moved to Los Angeles, I was a small fish in a much bigger pond. I didn't know what to do with myself. And in actual fact, now in hindsight, looking back, I had nothing to be insecure about. Nothing. So I think sometimes we can also be our own worst enemies. And I love what you said, that our self-worth does not depend on, you know, how much money we have or how successful we are. We are worthy simply by being ourselves, and being our own unique self is the best thing that we can be. How do we get in and switch off that little voice in the back? I know meditation has helped me, but what other tips do you have?
Yeah. So it's all about practice. And I would say that the one thing I remind myself of often, well, a couple of things. Okay. So sometimes it's nice to lean into science. Sometimes it's nice to lean into spirituality, religion, whatever works for you. You want to lean into that. I lean into all of it because I like to be, you know, inclusive, and I like, yes. Right. And so I would say that the first thing I have kind of come around to realizing is that, first of all, life loves you. That's why you're alive, right? Like life itself, like the infinite, eternal, like life force and energy that's keeping this planet of ours spinning on its axis, rotating and revolving around the sun, that keeps the sun shining, that keeps your heart beating, that keeps the lungs breathing. That same life force and energy loves you so much that it continues to breathe life into you. So you have to know that existence in the universe itself, life itself, loves you so much. Who cares if anybody else likes or loves you, right? Like, it's the ultimate prize right there. So that's one thing I like to remind myself of. The other thing is, I think lots of studies that have quite frankly found very directly that the most confident people and the people who believe themselves are not, in fact, they're largely not the most competent people. It's called the Dunny and Cougar effect, but the idea is that lots of the most successful people, success is correlated with confidence, but it's not associated or correlated with competence, with intelligence, with knowledge. It's not. It's kind of wild to think that. But what that tells us that if you really want to be successful in the world, you need to develop and establish an unconditional kind of confidence that does not waver based on your conditions, that does not waver based on how successful you are, how much money you have, or any of these things. And so you begin to put more faith in faith. You put more confidence in self-confidence itself, knowing that if you can grow it, even if it doesn't feel real at first, even if it feels like made up at first, or like really just a make-believe, over time, as you practice, you start to see and build evidence for why it's true. And so one of the greatest things you can do is simply decide, like a lawyer, this is the outcome we want, and then reverse engineer and build the evidence into that. So for instance, I am worthwhile, and then begin to look for evidence of why am I worthwhile? Why should I and can I feel better and prouder about who I am? And you simply say, well, I'm kind to people, and I do work hard, and I have a great heart, and you build evidence. And so I call it a self-love journal, but a book of positive aspects, anything that lets you build a case for why you're perfectly priceless and why you're so worthwhile is a very useful task.
I absolutely love that. And again, our housewife from last week, she mentioned something very similar. And I love the fact that I can combine the two right now. She said, look at ourselves in 2022 and look back and say, okay, well, I'm so happy that I learned a language or whatever skill set that you want to learn. And what that does is it distracts our brain from being in that state of anxiety, which is fear-based, or feeling depressed, like, being vibrationally low, and it helps us actually plant seeds in our own brain of things that we're going to achieve. And even in yesterday's interview with a crisis intervention therapist, she spoke about visualization, and it's the same concept really as well. It's reverse engineering things where we see ourselves in the future. And again, I said this in that interview, but visualization for some people are like, I can't see myself. I can't see him putting a ring on. I can't see myself at the beach with a child. Well, it's not necessarily about seeing yourself there. I think it's about planting that seed within our brain to say, okay, I'm going to have this, whatever that is.
I love that.
Yes. I think that confidence is so closely related to happiness. Let's talk about this and delve deeper and define it for our audience at home.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, the world of positive psychology, they don't do a whole lot of research on self-confidence. They study self-efficacy, they study self-compassion, but not a whole lot around self-confidence. What they do study is optimism. And so from a positive psychology perspective, when we talk about optimism, we talk about it in a different way than we do as lay people, as everyday people. So, scientific optimism is really about explanatory style. So it's how do you describe or explain things when they go wrong or when they go right. So what you ultimately want to do is you want to develop a very optimistic explanatory style. What that means is when something goes right, you want to be able to say it was personal, it was persistent and pervasive, meaning that when I passed that test, yes, I did it, it had to do with me, I worked hard or whatever, I'm smart, that's a quality or a trait that's going to exist through time and through space. That's pervasive and persistent. When something goes wrong, or something goes bad, you want to be able to do the opposite of that. You want to say, well, maybe I played a role in it, but also I just didn't study that hard, but it was all these other things too. And this isn't something that will transcend or that will exist in other places and spaces in my life. And so essentially what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to build an optimistic explanatory style that lets you build self-confidence in a deeper and deeper way, that lets you be resilient. And so in the face of adversity or failure, you're able to bounce back in ways that are increasingly happy and peaceful and loving, and you come out better on the other side of it, right? And so really at the end of the day, it's a lot to say about just wanting to recruit and entertain and feed and fuel thoughts that are helpful, not necessarily thoughts that are truthful. So what happens with most of us is we say, well, it's true, I did fail that test, and I've been failing the test, and instead of entertaining those thoughts, they may be true, but they're not helpful. So instead of that, you say, well, what's the helpful thought here? The helpful thought is, well, I probably could do better if I tried a little harder. I've done better in the past. Where else have I done well? And you start to just find or tell yourself a better feeling story based in truth. It still has truth. It's still based in truth, but you're looking at it in a way that's much more optimistic. And so it's a little complicated, but the idea at the end of the day, basically, is look for things about yourself to love. Just look for things about yourself to love.
Yes, it's all about self-love, isn't it? That's where it all starts. Let's talk about ambivalence. For our audience at home, ambivalence is, I guess, kind of vacillating between, and I want to relate this to relationships because I spent a very long time in therapy because I was ambivalent. And ambivalence is basically, you know, kind of questioning, or in some ways it's definitely fear-based, but in some ways it's being overly cautious and over analyzing, with which us women love to do. And it's about, you know, is he going to make a great dad, or does he love me? Does he not love me? Oh, is this meant to be? Is this my God-given relationship? So we kind of vacillate nonstop, but in a way it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is actually negative. It's self-defeating. How do we help people that are ambivalent?
Yeah, such a great question, Jacquie. Such a great question. So I would say that you nailed it. We do know that women tend to ruminate more than men do, right? Although men and women experience about the same levels of depression and low helplessness, but they express it and they manifest it differently. Lots of men will turn to alcohol. Lots of women will turn to other, you know, they'll basically ruminate, and they might go get therapy, maybe not, maybe they share with friends. But at the end of the day, I'd say the number one addiction on the planet by far is obsessive compulsive thinking. It's over analysis, right? Period. And that's the root of every other addiction too. It's the ability not to step outside of your brain and outside of your mind and exist in a much more sort of a happier, more dispassionate and detached place. So again, it comes down to practice. I think the best tool that I ever discovered for quieting the discursive mind is micro-meditations. Micro-meditation is just one breath, right? And it's only one breath that you take for the sake of enjoying that one breath, while not letting thoughts get in the way. So while you do whatever you do during the day, you take that one breath, you breathe in and out from the stomach, let all your thoughts go, and you just try to enjoy that one breath like it's the last breath you'll ever experience on the planet. You never know what could be, right? So as you go about your day, you're vacuuming, you're walking, you're talking, you want to take at least one of those breaths as often as you can remember. As you practice that and just doing it for the joy of it, you're literally rewiring your brain to be less over analytical and to obsess and be less and less compulsive about that thinking, about that discursive, like circular logic and thought or thinking that goes on. Because like 90% or more of our thoughts are redundant and negative. So if you can just practice something as simple as micro-meditation, you'd be surprised the ways in which you can begin to get that over analytical mind under control.
Can you walk us through this micro meditation?
Yep.
Because I agree with you completely. Meditation changed my life. I started with Headspace, which was 10 minutes a day. And within the first 10 days, I just set a goal. I'm going to do this for 10 days. And if it doesn't work, I'm never going to try it again. And literally, I think at about day 5, everything changed for me. I went from being in this fear-based state where I was financially so stressed out because I had my daughter at the time and I was a single struggling mom. This is years ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? And then within 5 days, I was completely like in a much better financial state. So it was,
Amazing.
I was completely changed within 5 days. So I completely believe in this. How do we do it in one breath?
Wow, that's fantastic, by the way. You must have been really receptive. It took me a lot longer. So the way to do it is, first of all, so we're setting our intention to enjoy what we're about to do. That's the most important piece. If you try to do this to get good at it, you won't get good at it. Or it'll take you longer to get good at it. But if you set your intention to only enjoy as deeply as you can, you'll get good really fast. Okay, so that's the first piece. The second thing all we're doing is we're breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. And it could be a deep breath, whatever feels comfortable and enjoyable to you, just in through the nose, out through the nose.
Oh, out. Okay.
Yeah. And what we're doing, and every time we're doing that, all we're doing is we're letting our thoughts go and we're really becoming more aware of how the breath feels, maybe what the air smells like, how our stomach feels, but we're much more aware of our body as we do this than we are of the thoughts in our head. And the more you focus on being really curious about how good it feels and what part you enjoy the most, the more quickly your mind will quiet itself. So you're just in through the nose, just really try to enjoy it. And the more you focus on the experience of enjoying, the less lost in thought you'll be. Okay, so the idea is that you want to do that no matter what else you're doing, at least once, as often as you can remember. You might literally be walking to the bathroom and see if you can't just take one breath all the way in, all the way out as you continue walking. You don't have to stop what you're doing. that one exercise, micro meditations, if you did that and didn't do anything else in the whole world, you never read another self-help book, psychology book, it would be more transformative than practically anything else you can possibly do, because you're doing something that even expert meditators don't do, which is weave and integrate a quiet, cool, calm, composed mind, a meditative mind, into your daily activities. And that's even something that's very difficult for expert meditators to accomplish. So that has been one of the greatest tools. It seems so small and so paltry, and you're like, what is this going to do? But your experience is a testament.
Yeah. I literally feel all the tension in my shoulders when I'm working. Sometimes I don't realize that my whole back tenses up and I hold all my tension. I just felt it all melt away. And it's very closely linked to the vagus. I'm not sure if I'm announcing that correctly.
You are.
Yeah,
vagus nerve.
Not vagus, but vagal nerve breath, which is expanding our stomach. We breathe in, expanding our stomach, and they breathe out through the mouth, but it's a very similar thing. I love this better because I could actually do it while I'm doing an interview and no one would even know.
Right. That's the best part. I love that. Yeah. And you're right. I love the point around sort of inducing the relaxation response, right? Because if you notice, most adults, we mostly breathe from the chest, and that's inducing a stress response, and your adrenaline goes up, your cortisol goes up. That's the stress hormone that puts on weight. It also narrows your perspective of the world, so you can't find solutions or answers very easily. You can't be nearly as creative. You're basically wearing yourself out. When you breathe from the stomach the way you just described so eloquently, you're inducing that relaxation response. The more relaxed you are, the more creative, efficient, effective, more efficacious. You're able to enter the psychological state of flow, or the zone, where you're 500 to 1,000% more productive at whatever you happen to be doing. You're also happier. You're easier to get along with. You find other people easier to get along with. So in all ways, relaxation is the greatest gift we can give ourselves in the world, really.
And it's such a happy place to be. And it's, being relaxed and in a state of peace. And automatically our partner feels that energy and they're automatically just happier, and I love what you said earlier in the interview about that, we need to be a walking example. Let's talk about how being in the flow automatically puts us in that and gets us out of our head and out of our own way, because being in our head is really no way to live.
No, it's not. No happiness is there. I used to always think about how I wanted peace of mind, or happiness was a state of mind. And I've come to realize, or even love, maybe it's a state of mind. I've come to realize that that's true in the beginning. It's mostly about thinking happier thoughts or more peaceful thoughts or more loving thoughts. But really, that's even working too hard. At some point in time, you stop thinking and worrying about thinking positive thoughts, and you can just not think thoughts at all. And you realize there's this infinite pool of happiness and of peace and of love always, that not only is within you, but is you, right? And so, part of what the invitation, I think, for all of us is to begin to dive into that pool of infinite peace and love and happiness, and to do that all day, no matter what else is going on around us. I think sometimes we're too tolerant of mind wandering, and we're too tolerant and we let the world push us around, or conditions or circumstances push us around, and then dictate what we think and feel. And there's no happiness in that. There's also very limited conditional success in that. We want an experience of increasingly unconditional success and peace and love. And in order to do that, you've got to found and base your happiness and your peace and your success on something that's perfectly unconditional, that's unshakable, that's immovable, right? And for me, that's not depending only on positive thinking. It's mostly realizing and recognizing that my very existence, that thoughtless, wordless existence or life force that I am, that is happiness already. It's peace already. It's love already. And I just need to get out of the way by always thinking so much. And so my intention every single day, knowing that this planet we're just a bridge. We're just here for a weekend really on this earth. And then we, continue on in whatever you believe spiritually or religiously. But essentially, we're here for a short period of time. And so we want to make the most of it. And we want to live as happily as humanly possible. The only reason we want to achieve or accomplish anything in the entire world is because we think in accomplishing it or acquiring it or achieving it, we're going to be happy. So it's happiness that's the meaning and purpose of life. It's the ultimate aim and end of human existence. So we're ultimately after that. So if you can just put that first, you'd be surprised how everything else is added.
When I get there, I'm going to be happy. Or when I get married to this relationship, I'm going to get happy. That's actually coming from a very negative state, isn't it? A state of pessimism, because it's very limiting. And as far as law of attraction goes, it's very, it stops us from attracting more, because we're putting limitations on source or God or the universe, whatever you want to call it. So it's actually such it stops us in our tracks, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a scarcity perspective. It's a scarcity perspective, and we don't always know it. Sometimes we think when we're focused on desire that we're in a place of positivity, but usually we're in a place of scarcity, and we think that somehow by achieving, accomplishing, or acquiring something will enhance our subjective well-being, that we'll be happier as a result, that we'll somehow be more worthwhile, we'll be more attractive, we'll be more something. And that's mostly egoic, right? That's coming from the ego. That's coming from a place where we aren't in touch with our infinite, eternal source of everything, right? And so in any way, the point really for me is to come from a different place where you know that you are one with everything and everybody that you want to attract. And then there is no attraction. There's just that which evolves from within you and unfolds from within you, and yet may show up as this person or this thing, but it wasn't coming through or coming from that person or thing. It just comes through them, right? But it ultimately came from you, but through that person or through that channel. And so the idea essentially is that, you are one with everybody and everything in the world that you could possibly ever want and need. And you could spend more time trying to realize that, really trying to realize how that's true. You'd be surprised at the ways in which you don't need to chase things because things start chasing you. You don't need to go after things. Things start going after you.
And I love that, especially for women that are watching this.
That's especially for you.
Want them to be chasing us and really stay in our feminine energy. I think thinking is a very masculine energy. And, I'm not suggesting that women don't do it, but we talk about it in my interviews in Love Unraveled, especially with Dr. Pat Allen, who's our communication specialist. And she differentiates that when women drink, it kicks in their thinking. So they think more. Let's talk about alcoholism and addictions and how happiness is related to that.
Yeah. So, ultimately, my firm belief and experience is that at the heart or root of every addiction is an addiction to thinking, right? Yeah. That's all it is. It's
you said earlier, which I absolutely love, that the worst addiction that we have is thinking.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's a thought that tells you you need a drink to be happy. It's a thought that tells you you need a drink to be more social. It's a thought that tells you you need a substance in order to be who of what and what you really are, right? And so, there's nothing outside you that can add to who and what you are. But there's also nothing that can take away from who and what you essentially are. And so the practice really is discovering that deep within yourself. And that's what meditation's for. That's what prayer's for. That's what, affirmations and gratitude's all about. It's all about coming to understand, appreciate, recognize, and be what you truly are, which is just source itself. And so much of the, work around addiction, I used to work in a clinic, really a rehab place, and as a spiritual counselor. And, it's such a challenge, but also a great opportunity, I think, because we don't realize often how lost in our own minds we are, and how much we think all day long, and how we mistake those thoughts for reality, right? But really, thinking is always about the past or about the future. It's almost impossible for it to be about the present. If you're truly present, you're not thinking. You're just presence itself. And when you're in the here and now, very little thinking is actually happening. But if you're in your mind, you're always living in memory or you're living in fantasy. And so the opportunity for yes.
And
yes.
You are in a state of anxiety.
You nailed it. It's all anxiety.
It happens in the present moment.
Yes, exactly. It's all anxiety. And so part of the work to be done with addiction, there's lots of approaches, but one thing I realized was that, and this is where mindfulness comes in really handy, is that what often people try to do is they try to repress this primitive almost, or this knee-jerk reaction to use a substance or to go participate in some unhealthy activity. And they'll try to repress it, but of course that doesn't work very well, because like a cancer, it grows. And so most of us think that addiction, is pain, but addiction just is an expression of the pain already inside of you, right? Just an expression of that. It's symptomatic, really, the addiction. And so much of the work around addiction really is not repressing, but when you are going to indulge and you can't help yourself from indulging, indulge, but indulge without thinking. Be fully in the experience of having that drink. Like, go slow. Like, drink one drop. Drink it real slow. Really try to milk it and save it for as much as you want. You'll be surprised. There's this intuitive knowingness in your body that when you're fully mindful, what mindful means not being full of mind or full of thoughts, but empty of mind, empty of thoughts, but full of awareness. When you're not thinking, but you're drinking, let's say, you're smoking, you'll suddenly discover that instead of needing 12 shots of tequila, you have 2, and you already feel kind of sick and you're already over it, But it's this story in our head that convinces you that the next drink will give you more happiness than the next. But if you're really in touch with what you're feeling, psychologically, emotionally, physically, spiritually, as you're drinking or as you're smoking, you're doing something unhealthy, you'll quickly know what's right or healthy and what's not and unhealthy. And it becomes much easier to drop that addiction without the pain that we usually associate with breaking an addiction.
You know, alcohol sales, and I know this because my neighbor is the CFO of MasterCard. So, I think the news has talked about it as well. Alcohol sales are soaring right now. I think tequila, especially in the United States.
Probably, yeah. George Clooney making a killing right now.
I have a couple of friends that did invest and start a tequila company. So they're doing amazing right now. I wish I'd put my money there. But look, it's easier said than done because, and I know that I found myself guilty. There's been a couple of times in my life where, you know, I haven't realized the stress levels are up so high because I've got the pressure of deadlines at work and I've got the stress of having to create stuff and you just don't know how it's going to go sometimes, or you get so busy. And again, it's about slowing down and getting back to self-love. But what message can we send to people who are, you know, in isolation and they're still kind of carrying on with these bad habits, which I think are quite toxic right now, because I think we're given this time to really do the work on ourselves. And I think anybody that's drinking to numb their pain, although I'm not completely opposed it, you know, I think if you have a couple of drinks, it's one thing. If you're drinking every night and getting drunk and things in your life aren't healthy, I think that's a whole different story and that needs to change. What message do we have for these people?
Wow, love that question. So I would say that the name of the game here is, again, love. And love is non-judgment, okay? It's just non-judgmental awareness. It's not more than that. It's not less than that. And so if you're drinking, if you're doing something that you consider unhealthy or toxic, there's no judgment there. It's just a question of what works and what doesn't. And if you're really paying attention and noticing, that means staying out of your head, but just being in your body and noticing what you're feeling and experiencing psychologically, emotionally, physiologically, and physically before you drink, when you drink, after you drink the next day, you'll come to see the ways in which it's not about a judgment or morality question or ethics question. It's just about what works and what doesn't work. The drinking doesn't work in terms of bringing you happiness. It doesn't work in terms of bringing you peace. It doesn't work in terms of bringing you love. It just doesn't work. And so it's not even a question of what the right thing to do or the wrong thing. It's just a question of, does it work or not? And it doesn't work. And that's the point, is that it doesn't work. And so you'll continue doing it for as long as you are caught up in the story of it working. But as soon as you step out a little bit away from that and really immerse yourself in the experience of it, you'll find that it doesn't work. And underneath all of that really is an invitation to practice self-soothing. Really, another word for love, just like non-judgment, is self-soothing, right? So you can find things to do, healthy alternatives that just put a little space or gap between you and that first drink, where you say, okay, maybe I'll have this drink, but let me go for the walk first and see how I feel. Or let me go call a friend first and see how I feel. Let me take a bath first and just see how I feel. Let me put that just aside for a second. I'm not saying no. I'm just going to do something else, or I'm going to have something to eat first or whatever. You might be surprised that little gap, if you can spend it without thinking, and you can practice something that allows you to self-soothe. It can be something as simple as taking a bath, as speaking to a friend, as laying down on the ground and just breathing. It could be anything. You might be surprised in the ways in which you suddenly don't have the same urge for the drink. You don't have the same urge for smoking or doing drugs or whatever. So just an opportunity there. And there's nothing but love here, and there's no judgment here. It's all really about doing what works in terms of bringing greater happiness and peace and love, and doing less of what doesn't bring that.
I love that. You're such an epitome of love, Rob. And the sort of love that's just, you know, that shines, that's completely fulfilling. Tell me, how was COVID and being in lockdown been for you? Have you had any personal challenges?
Yeah. So I feel always funny about saying this, but I'll be honest. I have enjoyed. I haven't enjoyed what's happening globally. Okay, nothing makes me happier than seeing people happy and at peace and healthy. Okay, and that being said, I have stayed focused on my little desk and the little things that I can control. And the one thing I most love doing is I love writing. I love writing about happiness and about peace and about love. And I love doing and having this kind of conversation with you, Jacquie. So a long time ago, I decided that I would focus on what made me happy and what I could control. Okay, and I realized over and over again that I control so much less than what I thought I could control. But the one thing I can always control is what I think, or whether I think, and what I feel. So this experience has been, I mean, honestly, I miss the gym. Okay, I love the gym. I've been running outside like you. I don't necessarily look forward to running outside the way I did look forward to going to the gym. And I miss, seeing beautiful faces like yours, out and about, but it's only one of you, but I miss seeing beautiful faces. And that being said, I have to say, like, I have had more peace and I felt more blissed out working on these books that I feel so much passion around, and just spending time not thinking and just breathing and swiffering my apartment. And like, it's just been amazing in that way, honestly. And I feel great peace about it. But that's not to take away from folks who aren't experiencing that. It's just to say that it's possible.
I love that. And so how are you managing without the gym? Have you turned your living room into a workout?
I wish. You don't know, hon. Great question. Like,
let me just say to everyone at home, Rob has an amazing, amazing body. I know that it doesn't just come with, half an hour a day. So how are you handling this?
I'm going to play that compliment in my head forever, Jack. You have no idea. Especially coming from you, that's the highest compliment. You're just gorgeous. So for me, what I've done is I run outside. I used to run when I was younger. And I go hard on those runs like every other day. The days in between, I go a little just light, but I go for a 5K run, not long, and then I do this home workout that makes me feel like I'm 10 years old again. And I've been trying to recruit a friend of mine who I know has been quarantining like me. She's been staying inside. I'm like, listen, this friend of mine, I'm like, I want to bench press you because I've not been able to get like weights, and I just feel the need to push, like, really lift real weight. Yeah. So I'm missing that part of it the most. And I've tried ordering weights through everywhere. And now the couple weights that are available, like on eBay, they've hiked their prices up like 100% or way more than that, 1,000% in some cases. So it's been a little tough. What about you? I know you are just always in fantastic shape, always, just looking beautiful, but it's been hard.
That's a huge compliment coming from you. Thank you so much. Well, if you were here, I'd make you bench press me if that was.
That'd be perfect. I'd be then I would be all set. No complaints with quarantine.
Okay. You would definitely get a good workout in. I have had my physiotherapist do, she's on an app. So she has all these exercises, I think about 13 in total. And they're just simple mat stuff, which I initially found so painful to do because they're quite the opposite to my usual workout. They're kind of counterintuitive, where I'd normally be doing sit-ups and kind of sweating and pushing myself. These are all about breathing and kind of doing reverse stuff. But I'm working on my core strength. And so that's been a little bit different, but it's been great because I can do it by the app and I have to check off every time I do it. So it keeps me accountable to her, which I realize with myself, if I'm not accountable to someone, I'm like, I did a workout today. I walked around the block for 5 minutes, which is like nothing. And now that I'm over 40, it's true what they say, Rob, you have to really work out harder, which is why I added the jog in. So I'm stuck in Sydney right now, as you know, and I couldn't get back to Los Angeles, and it was better for me to stay here because my family's here and my parents are older. So I wanted to make sure that I'm close to them. And, my daughter loves to hang out with them. And so I have made it my chore to run from my house all the way past the Harbour Bridge, around the Opera House. I have no excuse because, to be able to live where I do, which I'm so grateful for, is such a blessing. And so I've made it a goal to run. But what I was doing wrong was I was doing this every day. So at about day 4 of running, I went, oh my God, I feel depressed, but I wasn't sad. What was happening was I had gone too hard on my body and my body needed a little bit of a break. So I'm back to doing 2 days of running and a day of walking and then 2 days of running. So, but thank you. I'm still doing the run walk. So I'm building it up. I don't think I'm ever going to get to 20 kilometers, but who knows, maybe a marathon at some point.
Look at you. Oh my gosh. I love it. I should have known. I just love that. I remember running like, I think I've never ran probably more than 12 miles, but I remember 7 or 8 being like that sweet spot where I was like, okay, I feel like I've really done it, and anything more than this feels. So I am so impressed that my goodness, a half marathon, a marathon, that is incredible. Just when I thought I couldn't be more impressed, that's pretty incredible.
I find that the energy that it stores in my body, especially when I start with it early in the morning, it really sets the tone for my day. And it gives me that really kind of, positive vibe and energy. And I do my workout, I come home and I have a piece of fruit because it stores that energy. And then I'm able to put that really, good energy into my work.
Wow. See, that's why I think to this day, the one thing I never miss is a workout if I can. Really, like I just have to get that run in. I have to do the little home workout, the squat jumps and all that stuff, push-ups. But like that's incredible, like incredibly important. And I love you really emphasize that point. It's so easy to overlook and say, oh yeah, exercise, but you feel so much better when you're done. You actually feel like even more self-confident and more self-loving for just because you worked out.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I miss about being at home in Los Angeles right now is my amazing hikes, because I love doing Runyon. And I remember when I first started Runyon, I was really struggling in my career, Rob. And people don't know this about me, but I really, really did it tough. I mean, there was a point in my career when I lived in Los Angeles. I was at crossroads. I was basically, you know, faced with no work, and I didn't have any money in my account, like to the point where I wasn't sure how I was going to survive to eat or even buy water at that point. So I was like, and of course in Los Angeles, you can't drink tap water. And what I did was I set one simple goal, and that was to go for a hike every day. And when I first did Runyon, you know, that hard part of Runyon, I couldn't even walk up there. I was like,
pretty intense though.
And my lungs were literally burning up, that by the end of the 30 days, I was running it up. And I just love doing that hike, and it automatically, you know, makes sure that my legs are stronger. And what I did within that 30 days, it completely turned my life around. I had an amazing job. I had money come in, and it just changed the trajectory of my life for the better.
I just love that story, because so many examples like that in my life as well. Like, and it's hard for people to understand that. It takes a little bit of faith, but when you just start doing things that might feel a little hard in the beginning, but you know they're better for you and they're going to increase your happiness, it's amazing the way everything else begins to come around and find you, and opportunities show up and people show up, and even money starts. I mean, it's really wild. Like, it's so easy to just, you know, explain it away, but it's actually a principle and a life law that it worked, right? So I just love you saying that. And I'm inspired by that. And I think, you know, it's something I always want to remember, that at the end of the day, prioritizing happiness is good for your success, and it's good for your money, and it's good for relationships.
I love that. Are we going to see another book come out of this?
Oh my gosh, yes. So that's part of the thing. I've been working on these books, and initially it started out as one book, and now it's over 10, because they're little, at first it was like long form books, but now they're mostly quote books. They're little meditations, little sutras that I've polished over and over again. So I just got rid of all the words in between, and I'm just keeping the little gems, the best parts of each section of that book. So yes, I'm actually, I got a contract with a new publisher. So I just have to send that in. And yeah, hopefully in the new year, right around January, they said we'll start releasing the books, but I kind of want to release more before that. So I guess we'll see. Like, I don't want to wait, you know.
Can we get some sort of nugget about what it's going to be about?
Yeah, so I'd say that, you know, ultimately I always write about the ways in which happiness and peace is a master key to everything else in your life. That's what I know from science. That's what I know from spirituality. That's what I know from my private practice in my own life. And so, you know, really the one book I think I'll probably release first is just Peace from the Inside Out. And so it's about not seeking peace of mind, but peace of no mind, right? So there's the peace of mind that we think of, but usually there's some anxiety underneath that. And that peace of mind thing is very fleeting, but there's a peace of no mind. And that's all about losing your mind. When you lose your mind, you don't end up missing it, right? You lose your mind, you don't miss it. You just enjoy peace. And so much of it is about that. And there's these tiny little sutra, like 1 or 2 liners that basically just, each little meditation is an entire teaching. It's supposed to capture an entire teaching. So you could literally read 2 lines and that would be all you needed. You could read the rest of the book too, but that's the idea with the book, is that every line is supposed to capture an entire teaching. So it's mostly about peace, but there's one on success, love, bliss, one on spirituality. At the end of the day though, they're really about enjoying the happiness that you are.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And affirmations are so important. And what you're actually doing is you're doing the work for everybody, really, which is sometimes hard to get started. I think once they pick that up and read that first affirmation, and I love affirmations, I use them all the time, they get out of a state of stuck into prosperity, and everything, you know, evolves from there. Rob, thank you so much for joining me. Please go ahead and pimp yourself out. Where can everyone?
You're so much better at pimping me out, though. You're so good. But I like to be pimped out. But so you can find me at coachrobmack.com. That's online. You can also find me on all social media accounts: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at Rob Mack, MACK official. And you can find my book, everywhere great books are sold, including Barnes & Noble and Amazon.
I love that. Happiness from the inside out. Thank you so much for joining us, Rob Mack. I love you to the end of the earth.
Oh my gosh, love you so much. And I appreciate you so much, truly.
Well, I appreciate you.
Amazing.